The most decisive weapon of World War II wasn't the Spitfire, the Sherman tank, or even the atomic bomb. It was a more subtle, invisible force. Information. And that information, in an age before digital computers, had to be processed, calculated, and deciphered by hand. The Allied war machine generated a tidal wave of numbers ballistics trajectories for artillery shells, aerodynamic stress tables for new aircraft, endless statistical analyses for logistics, and, most crucially, the mind-bending cryptographic puzzles of enemy codes. To turn this numerical deluge into actionable intelligence, the Allies mobilized a secret army. But this army didn't carry rifles or wear uniforms. They wore skirts and sweaters, and their weapons were slide rules, mechanical calculators, and brilliant, disciplined minds. They were at the human computers, and they were almost exclusively women. While Rosie the Riveter became the iconic symbol of female contribution on the factory floor, these women were the riveters of the mind, performing intellectual labor on an industrial scale. Their work was so classified that many didn't understand the full impact of their calculations until decades after the war. They operated in the shadows of Bletchley Park's huts, in the sprawling offices of the Army's Ballistics Research Laboratory, and in the top-secret confines of Los Alamos. Without them, the Normandy landings would have been a bloodier gamble. The Enigma code might have remained unbroken, and the Manhattan Project would have stalled in a swamp of unsolved equations. This is the story of the women who computed the Allies to victory, one painstaking calculation at a time. The need for human computers exploded with the war. Modern warfare had become a science, and science runs on data. Take something as fundamental as artillery. Firing a shell isn't just point and shoot. You need precise firing tables that account for the gun's type, the shell's weight, the propellant's temperature, the wind speed and direction, even the rotation of the Earth. A single table for one gun, under various conditions, could require over 2,000 complex each involving the solving of differential equations by hand. The U.S. Army's Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland became a hub for this work. They hired hundreds of women, many with mathematics degrees from top colleges like Mount Holyoke and Wellesley, who found their career paths in academia blocked by gender prejudice. The job was advertised as computer, and it was grueling, meticulous work. Teams of women would work in shifts, 24 hours a day, using desktop mechanical calculators that could only add, subtract, multiply, and divide. To solve a single differential equation for one trajectory point might take a human computer 40 hours of monotonous error. The room would hum with the click-clack of calculating machines, a symphony of gears performing the arithmetic of destruction. The pressure was immense. A mistake in a firing table could mean shells landing on Allied troops. Yet, this work was considered mere clerical labor, a step above typing. The women were paid as such, and their contributions were rarely acknowledged by the male engineers and officers who used their data. But the most famous theater of operations for human computers was Bletchley Park, the British code-breaking center. Here, the challenge wasn't ballistics, but language and logic. The German Enigma machine, with its rotating scramblers, created an astronomical number of possible cipher settings each day. Breaking it required a combination of brilliant intuition provided by minds like Alan Turing's and brute force computation. The brute force was supplied largely by women. In Hoot 6, which tackled Army and Air Force Enigma, and Hoot 8 focused on the more complex naval Enigma. Young women Wrens, members of the Women's Royal Naval Service, and civilians operated the primitive early bombs. These were electromechanical devices, not computers in the modern sense, but complex key-testing machines that required constant supervision, adjustment, and logging of results. The operators, like Jean Valentine and Ruth Bourne, worked in deafening, hot rooms, tending to the worry, clattering bombs, changing their drums and plug boards according to cribs provided by the crypt. They were the vital interface between the theoretical break and the daily extraction of intelligence. Their work, shift after relentless shift, turned the seemingly random gibberish of intercepted messages into vital intelligence. On U-boat positions, Luftwaffe orders, and Wehrmacht movements. The success of D-Day relied heavily on the deception fed to the Germans, and that deception was validated by Enigma decrypts processed by these women. They were told never to speak of their work, to feign ignorance if asked. For decades, They were the forgotten cogs in the legendary Bletchley machine. Across the Atlantic, an even more monumental computational challenge was underway. The Manhattan Project, building an atomic bomb, was a problem of physics, chemistry, and engineering of unprecedented complexity. It required simulating neutron diffusion, calculating critical mass, and modeling the explosive lensing for the implosion design of the plutonium bomb. The theoretical physicists, like Robert Oppenheimer, Richard Feynman, and Hans Bethe, provided the equations, but solving them was another matter. Enter the human computers of Los Alamos. A team was assembled, again largely composed of highly educated wives of scientists or specially recruited female mathematicians. They worked in rooms filled with Marchant desktop calculators. Molly, Mary, Frankel, and others would work in teams. One person reading an equation, another performing a step on her calculator, calling out the result to the next in line, in an assembly line of arithmetic. Richard Feynman, who oversaw the computing group at one point, famously organized them into a competitive, efficient system to handle the staggering workload. The calculations for the Trinity test, the first atomic detonation, were done by these women. They computed the expected yield, the blast radius, the fallout patterns. When the sky lit up over the New Mexico desert on July 16, 1945, it was the physical validation of millions of their manual calculations. Yet, in group photos and official histories, they were often relegated to the background, their role obscured by the towering figures of the male scientists. The legacy of these human computers extends far beyond the war's end. They didn't just win a war, they midwifed the computer age. Their experience with large-scale systematic computation proved the desperate need for automated calculation. Many of the first programmers for ENIAC, the world's first general-purpose electronic computer commissioned by the Army to compute firing tables even faster, were recruited from the ranks of the human computers at Aberdeen. Women like Kathleen McNulty, Frances Belas, and Jean Jennings were chosen because they already understood the logic of computation. With no programming languages or manuals, they learned to configure ENIAC's labyrinth of cables and switches to solve problems, becoming the world's first digital programmers. Their pioneering work created the very profession of software engineering. Similarly, at NASA in the post-war years, and into the space race, pools of female computers like the African-American mathematicians portrayed in Hidden Figures performed the trajectory calculations for the first American satellites and manned spaceflights. The war had proven that women were not just capable of high-level mathematical work, they were essential to it. It cracked open the door to STEM fields. However slowly and inequitably, the story of the human computers is a powerful correction to the historical record. It moves women from the periphery of the great man narrative of World War II science and technology to its very center. They were not supporting characters. They were the operational engine. Every shell that landed on target, every secret message read, every revolutionary weapon built, passed through their hands and minds. They computed the path to victory, and in doing so, calculated a new future for themselves and for the world of technology.